Welcome everyone to the Historic Preservation Commission monthly meeting for Tuesday, October 10th, 2023. To kick off the meeting, if we can review last month's minutes.
Nice to meet you.
Any questions on last month's minutes, or do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the September 12th minutes as actually.
All those in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed?
Can I just make sure so I can know? We are gonna start the meeting, and so it's recording, and we need to make sure that we have as much not have the ambient sound on the outside, just so that it records correctly for the record so that others can view it after the fact. So can you just so that when my staff is doing the minutes, can we say again who did the motion and who did the second? That way I have it on the record correctly.
Okay, do you want us to just redo it or state who did it?
Go ahead and redo it.
Okay. I'll make a motion to approve the September 12th minutes as submitted.
Perfect.
And I second it.
Perfect. Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right. So tonight we do have a public hearing on the agenda for 15 Marvin Court for a local historic nomination. So welcome to the meeting of the Historic Preservation Commission of the City of Webster Groves. This commission recommends to the City Council the adoption of ordinances designating single structures or sites, portions of structures, groups of structures, landscape elements, works of art, or integrated combinations thereof, having a special historical or architectural interest or value as landmarks or historic districts. In making this determination, the commission sits as an administrative body and by ordinance hears the applicant and any other evidence that may be pertinent. In order to accommodate the schedules of all applicants, the commission requests that all persons wishing to speak limit their comments to evidence regarding the historical significance of the proposal. Above all, please be concise and to the point. Comments voicing nothing more than general opposition to an application will not be tolerated. When we have a large crowd in attendance, applicants are granted 10 minutes, not including time used to respond to questions of the commission. To ensure that other persons who wish to present evidence are heard, the commission limits the comments of individuals to 3 minutes. Groups of 3 or more shall elect a spokesperson who shall be limited to 7 minutes. The commission has the ability to expand time allotted to hear all information and making a determination. Probably do we need to say a roll call for a public hearing? Yeah, oh, okay. Okay, so the purpose of the public hearing this evening is to determine if the structures and properties located at 15 Marvin Court should be designated as a historic structure. I would ask that one of the members read the criteria for consideration of nomination as set forth in section 52.190 of the Historic Preservation Ordinance, so that those attending will have an understanding of the basis for determining nomination.
Put them on the slides if one of the members wants to read the 3 slides in regards to the criteria that you're supposed to consider.
Sure.
Take it on.
The Historic Preservation Commission shall, upon such investigation as it deems necessary, make a determination as to whether a nominated property, structure, site, area, or district meets one or more of the following criteria based on the criteria for evaluation for the National Historic Register of Historic Places. A, its character, interest, or value as a part of the development, heritage, or cultural characteristics of the community, county, state, or country. B, its overall setting and harmony as a collection of building structures, objects, where the overall collection forms a unit. C, its potential to be returned to an accurate historical appearance regardless of the alterations or insensitive treatment that can be demonstrated to be reversible. D, its location as a site of a significant local, county, state, or national event. E, its identification with a person or persons who significantly contributed to the development of the community, county, state, or country.
So there's a couple more slides if you want to trade off with someone else who wants to read the rest.
You know, do
You're the closest.
yeah. Okay, F. Its embodiment of distinguished characteristics of an architectural type valuable for the study of a period type, method of construction, or use of indigenous materials. G, its identification as the work of a master builder, designer, architect, or landscape architect whose individual work has influenced the development of the community, county, state, or country. H, its embodiment of elements of design, detailing, materials, or craftsmanship that render it architecturally significant. I, its embodiment of design elements that make it structurally or architecturally innovative. J, its unique location or singular physical characteristic that make it an established or familiar visual feature of the neighborhood, community, or city. K, its character as a particularly fine or unique example of a utilitarian structure, including but not limited to farmhouses, gas stations, or other commercial structures with a high level of integrity of architectural significance. I, its suitability for preservation or restoration. And M, its potential to yield information important to history and prehistory. Any structure, property, or area that meets one or more of the above criteria shall also have sufficient integrity of location, design, materials, and workmanship to make it worthy of preservation and restoration.
Okay, so the members of the commission will consider these factors when making a determination. Is there anyone who wishes to speak in favor of this proposed designation?
Yes.
Okay, for the record, can you please state your name, address, and affiliation with this property?
I'm the Reverend David Denoon. My address is 857 Tuxedo Boulevard here in Webster Groves. I have done significant historical research about 15 Marvin Court. It was the home of church members of mine, and in investigating Melvin and Thyra Bonds, I discovered their home, which was in the midst of a 13-acre industrial park. And I found out that this 13-acre industrial park was inscribed by streets in my area and by a thing called the Benny Gordon subdivision. Upon investigation, I discovered that the Benny Gordon subdivision was a neighborhood project, cul-de-sac that was planned with 13 properties around the cul-de-sac. The planning had been done by Benny Gordon Jr., who is a prominent citizen of Webster Groves, an activist, a business person, and a real estate developer, and African-American. And he created, or at least conceived, of the first and, to my knowledge, only neighborhood project that was created in 1955-56 for the occupancy of middle-class African Americans in Webster Groves. Unfortunately, only the home at 15 Marvin Court was ever finished, and this was, according to Mr. Gordon in reminiscences, because once the demonstration home was finished and purchased by the Bonses, white neighbors decided that they would protest and did so by placing for sale signs in their yards and threatening Roosevelt Federal Savings and Loan, which had financed the project with boycott. And the result was that, unable to get any further funding, Mr. Gordon was unable to put up any more homes, and the project was basically scuttled. There was a neighborhood to the north that was occupied by a number of other people, all of them African American, and in 1964, the Land Clearance for Reclamation Authority of the City of Webster Groves determined that this area was a slum, that all of the homes in that area and all of the Benny Gordon subdivision, save the Bonds' home, should be raised, the streets vacated, and an industrial park put up in its place, appealed for rezoning of the area. And the Bonds, as Mrs. Bonds would come to say, were left on an island in an industrial park. The Bonds sued the city of Webster Groves following that decision on the part of the city council, and in 1968 lost on appeal. This home has great historical significance for the city of Webster Groves, not only because of the fact that Benny Gordon built it, but also because it is causing me and other citizens to discover all sorts of history that we had never heard of about Webster Groves before. And we want to bring all of that to light. Please grant historic building status to 15 Marvin Court for all these reasons and more.
Do you have anything else that you'd like to add?
Is there more I should add?
Just giving you the opportunity.
Well, I'll also offer you the story of how it is that I discovered it. I am the pastor of the church across the street. And in 1956 or 7, we were the largest congregational church in the state of Missouri. And we had lots of Sunday school students. And among those was a man who dropped off a series of photographs that had been taken when he was in Sunday school. And these were taken in 62, 64, 66, and 68. And in 62 and 64, I saw photographs of lots of little white children. And then in 62, there were lots of little white children. In 64, all of a sudden, there was this little black girl in the midst. And that was Gail's sister, Cassandra. And I found out that Cassandra was also there in 66. And her mother was in the photograph in 1968, teaching the class. So I looked around to see what more I could find out about Thyra Bonds, and I ran across this lawsuit that I just told you about. And I also found out that she lived at 15 Marvin Court, and I despaired for being able to have any contact with anybody. I didn't know who lived there. And Mrs. Bonds had died in 2005, I found out. So, and her daughter's name was Gail Jones, of all things. So it wasn't as though this was going to make anything easy in terms of investigation. And I preached the sermon on January 29th for our Heritage Sunday about Thyra Bonds and her suit against the city of Webster Groves. And that I thought was going to be it. when 3 weeks later on the cover of the Webster Kirkwood Times, who shows up? Gail and Gail and Gail. And who else?
And Gwen.
And Gwen.
3 Gales and a Gwen.
3 Gales and a Gwen. And in the third paragraph of this article, Gail Jones does a shout out to First Congregational Church where she grew up. And after shrieking loudly and jumping up and down, I realized that I didn't have an email address, but I did have a street address. So I sent her a letter with the sermon in it. And she had all of these artifacts from the sale of the home and stories to tell and reminiscences to offer. About playing in dirt piles.
Yeah, we
when
would
she
play
was
in
a
the fields.
kid, because there was,
For quite a few years.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
we just know what was gonna be, what it was gonna become.
Yeah.
Because we always thought it was gonna be a neighborhood, but it wasn't.
right,
So even my kids were, my oldest is 50, so she was throwing dirt in off these hills also.
Yeah.
I mean,
you may have to tell them your name next.
my name is Carlos Mora. My mom and dad moved into the house next door to the Bonds, probably the same year that they moved in,
Mhm.
because the people that lived there decided they wanted to sell too, so, I've been there ever since. I mean, I grew up there, at 521 Lafayette. In fact, my dad was born on Lafayette before they decided to wipe out the whole neighborhood. And it was all because of, people on Newport not wanting to have a black neighborhood to abut
In their backyard,
yards. Yeah.
literally in their, not in my backyard,
Right.
literally. yeah.
And, I don't know, luckily, we got our house, and we've been there ever since. And when Gail told me about this, and she said that they were calling those houses slums, I was like, oh, wait a minute, I remember a slum to me is probably way different than what those people were thinking slums were, but to me, they were neighborhood homes, you know, people, I knew the kids that lived in those homes, and I don't know if they were compensated. I did try to get in touch with some of the people that I knew that grew up around the neighborhood, but they haven't gotten back to me yet to find out if they were compensated for the removal, but I doubt that they were given very much, considering that they were calling them slums. And they even wiped out a church. Black people had built a beautiful rock church. They closed off the street, tore down the church, and then you had this hills and hills of dirt. So after that, then came the industrial. And they still try to get me to sell somebody down there.
One of the things that I think is also really moving is that folks, the surrounding neighborhood, the L shape of neighborhood that is around this development or proposed development was all white, and it's become mixed. Thank God. Over the last many years.
Probably 15.
Yeah.
10, 15 years.
Yeah.
Gradually, but what they've done is pretty much gentrified, where there was just a lot, weeds and trees, they've torn those down and built houses that nobody could ever imagine affording now. And it's, the whole neighborhood has changed, but it looked better. But now some blacks are even able to afford those.
Some.
Yeah, you can see it was a neighborhood.
Yeah.
It was a neighborhood, and there was another neighborhood that was planned for just the south end of it, and it was ready. It's ready to go. 1963, Benny Gordon Jr., picking up on your notion of whether or not people were compensated fairly, staged a protest in front of City Hall with other residents from that area and other parts of North Webster who had been pressured out of their homes by the Land Clearance for Reclamation Authority. And his complaint and their complaint was that they were basically kicked out and compensated for their homes, but not in such a way as they would ever be able to purchase another home in Webster Grove. They had to move away. And it's history. It's hidden history is coming forward.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak in favor of this proposed nomination?
I will. Hi,
And can you state your name and your address?
I'm Gail Jones, 15 Marvin Court, my home, my childhood home, and I still live there to this day. When my mom passed away in 2005, I moved back home. And I'm just thankful and grateful that the fight that my mom and dad started, it's come back around full fruition. And the Lord has used Pastor Denoon, who I never met and didn't even know until January, February of this year, that we're bringing this to light. Bringing light to a hidden history in Webster Groves. I still live there today. I love my home, and I just appreciate that you all giving us the opportunity to share this history, to bring it back to light to the city. You know, I'm sure a lot of you all were unaware of what happened, but moving forward, we just need to tell the story, and then where do we go from here? How do we restore? How do we rebuild? And you know, I still live there. My son, he's in college, but it's still our home, our family home, and I just want to finish the fight that my mom and dad started. That, you know, they were turned down, but hopefully I can take the torch and move this thing forward. So, thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak in favor of this proposed nomination?
Local architect Michael Blaze, and actually my son has a house in the neighborhood. He rents the Tuxedo Park train station, which is in your neighborhood, just on the other side of the tracks. I actually learned this history today. This actually can be for another reason, but I read all the newspaper articles that were in the packet, and I had no idea.
I just met you this past Sunday at the
Yeah,
block party.
yeah.
Yes, thank you for coming.
And I think it definitely meets the requirement and meets requirements of the historic landmark for all those reasons. And architecturally, there is a history for that style of house being developed at that time too. I definitely give my support.
Do we have anyone else who wishes to speak in favor of this proposed nomination? Is there anyone who wishes to speak in opposition to this proposed nomination? So at this time, we will close the public hearing. All discussion beyond this point relative to this matter needs to be among the commission members only. And do not ask questions of the speaker.
So, and we can reopen if you need to. I just wanted to let you all know, so in your packets, I just have a list, because it was a lot of paper. I just have a list of all the exhibits. Is a packet of all the exhibits in the middle of the table, should you wish to look at any of them. I did go ahead, and in case you wanted to discuss anything, I do have a series of slides with some of the key exhibits, so I'll just go through them briefly. So this first one is the aerial photograph today and from 1955, with 15 Marvin Court highlighted in red, and in the 55, you can see the area that was cleared for the beginnings of the subdivision. The history of the property, I have some bullets down the side. We don't have to go through all of them necessarily, but they're all in your packet. But he applied for the subdivision for a new 13 lot plat. And it was reviewed by the Planning Commission in February of 1955 and approved by the council in April of 1955. The ordinance approving the subdivisions in your packet. This is the subdivision plat that was recorded. It was recorded with St. Louis County, May of 1955. We had one of our members found the building permits for the house itself. And for those that don't know, all the permits going back very back to 1918 are with the Webster Groves Library. So if you're looking for something there, you have to kind of look through them by year. It's a little difficult. But the permit was approved March 8th of 1956 because the building commissioner initially determined that the orientation of the house on the lot didn't meet the code and denied them their original permit. And then the Board of Adjustment agreed that they could rotate the house in the other orientation. The building commissioner thought that the house needed to face Lafayette and not Marvin, and that's why they initially denied the permit. There's a number of articles that I think were really fascinating, so they're all in here, but these are some of the early articles after the approval that include talking about the opening of the subdivision. There's also a whole series of ads, most of these in the St. Louis Argus paper, which is why you can see a lot more about like come see the model home and other things like that. The sales contract from the bonds purchasing the house. I know this has a date of July 1956. I know there's some additional paperwork with another date. And in the court case, it talked about January 1957, but in that time frame, purchasing the particular house, which was the model home for the subdivision. This was added to the packet just because I think it was quite interesting about his realty company. They were located, he had an office located at 808 North Elm, and they had a introduction to their sales group. This was sort of before it was rezoned, the area was rezoned around them. It was kind of right after the first house was built, and while some of the problems were occurring related to the property in the subdivision. But this one was in particular, they were at the 144 West Lockwood Farm and Home Savings and Loan Building, and they were introducing all of their realtors. This is the that was referenced by Reverend Danoon about the picketing that happened prior to the rezoning of the property. This area outlined in red is the area that was rezoned industrial as part of that rezoning in 1964. This is the ordinance that rezoned. It was listed as 50 parcels of land, approximately 13 acres. It went to Plan Commission in April and May of 1964. And then it was at City Council from June through October of 1964. There's a lot on record about whether the bonds had been given proper notification. All the minutes from the City Council meetings are in the packet of evidence too. And then the court case summary that it was denied a motion for rehearing or to transfer to the Supreme Court October 23rd of 1968. And an application to transfer was denied on December 9, 1968. So I just wanted to remind you of, put on the record all of the different items that were in the packet for your discussion.
Is there another packet that we could maybe use for?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Want you?
I remember last month's meeting, we talked about the city council minutes. Was there mention of some of them were missing, or did we find?
Found all the
Found-
city council minutes. Yeah, they were, we had to find them in books. That's why the images in the packets are a little funny. I took photos with my phone of each of the books because they're bound in such a way you can scan them. But if we ever needed more formal, we'd be able to probably figure out a way to scan the documents.
So all of the setbacks is solved by turning the building 90 degrees. That had nothing to do with any of the dispute about the property itself. that was just the zone, or just the setback thing.
Yeah, I mean, and you couldn't tell whether it was just one thing that the building commissioner was trying to interpret the code. I mean, we interpret the code that way today in terms of where your primary front yard is, where your rear yard, it helps determine where your rear and your side yards are. We let people put the front of the house facing either street that they want. It doesn't matter, as long as they still have to follow what is the official rear setback. So really what it did is it made their primary front yard is really the side yard of the house because of how the house is oriented. Their rear yard is the other side of the house and their side yard is their backyard. So it's just a little bit of the orientation, but back in that time, they probably stuck very closely. There was a new zoning code that went into place in 1956. So this was probably right around the time they were starting to formally follow the brand new zoning code that was put over the entire city. And a lot of the lots are non-conforming based on the zoning that was put in place. But that was a whole separate, just small, tiny issue. But I thought it was important to put all the notes in there of just everything we were able to find.
So somebody did make the point, like the lots are strangely sized or something that they wouldn't fit exactly. And they were trying, I don't know if the argument really went very far, but somebody made the argument that the lot sizes would be a problem, but that didn't.
Yeah.
What were they suing the city for again?
The rezoning of all the industrial around it.
Just to block the land reclamation?
Yeah,
To block the
yeah,
whole
so
thing?
they basically, so the subdivision itself, the first house was built. And then when the lawsuit came, it's because everything got rezoned so that now they were surrounded on all sides by industrial. It also vacated the road that was the main road into the subdivision. And so it was pretty much ended the ability for the rest of the subdivision to be constructed completely.
And there was a discussion about the 50 feet, the 50-foot setback away from the property that there was going back and forth about, and I didn't know exactly where they were talking about, but I assumed it was the west side of the property. Do you know where that is?
So again, that probably doesn't come into play for this historic
No,
nomination.
If we can leave that off the table, that's fine. I didn't know
Yeah.
where this conversation needed to go. but-
Yeah, no, it's really trying to determine, so going back to our slides. Does everything that we have found in regards to this meet one of these? And staff had underlined the three that we felt probably were the most pertinent ones that would be met. So you can have that conversation whether you think that there's another one under this list that it meets, whether one of these doesn't meet it. That's a discussion that you all need to have. And I can flip back and forth between these as needed, but I think those three were the most applicable ones.
So this historic designation would just be a local designation. They would have to go elsewhere if they wanted anything higher like a national.
Correct. So sometimes people start with the national and then go to the local. A lot of ours start local and go to the national. So there is always that possibility that should they wish to continue to pursue, they could go on the national level. It's a little bit harder with national level when it's a figure that's important to the community, but there's still the possibility. But for us, we're focusing on it's the local, and that's what would be recommended to the city council.
So is more better when you're picking the criteria under which to recommend it?
I don't think it matters either way. If there are other ones that people feel are applicable in some way, I think it's always important to just make sure that your case is strong with the items that you've picked.
Mark, can you go back to the first? Yep. A through. Yeah. I don't know necessarily if D could be applied to this in a specific way, as far as there were lawsuits, there were situations involving Webster Grove City Council. So I feel like that is a significant local event.
Well, it went all the way to the state Supreme Court, correct?
It was denied going to the state Supreme Court, yes. But yes, you can definitely add that to your criteria. It was our initial review that we quickly did the first three, but definitely. You can add that to your motion if all of you are in agreement.
Is there any information about whether the home was shown as a model home to others?
So I know we have in the various ads, it was open and those ads were over a long period of time. So if you look, let's see, in the exhibit list, it talks about each of the various ads. And so I would assume, based on the various timing of when the ads were put in the paper and when there was finally a contract on the home, that I'm sure it had to have been shown over some period of time. But no, we don't have a specific record of showings of the home, but it was the model home.
We have the ads though, so that would imply that it was being shown.
Yes, and so let's see, oh, here we go. So the ads were April 13, 1956, May 11, 1956, May 25, 1956, July 20th, 1956. And then their first sales contract was in July of 1956. So I would believe that there was probably quite a few, depending on how the ads were going, showings over that number of months' time. Plus an article in the paper about the new subdivision opening.
So there were sales of houses on the other lots? Or sales contracts? No.
Not that we could find, I mean, we hadn't gone specifically. The hard part with finding the building permits is you have to specifically know a time frame. So, you know, I don't think any of us, and we could still do that before the council meeting. You have to go through, click page by page by page through each year. You did,
I did.
you
and
looked to see if there was any others for Marvin Court.
Yes, and Marvin Court was the only one I found.
Okay.
And it was a lot of clicking. but-
It was a lot of clicking. Yeah, a lot of times if you kind of know about, or you get lucky. I went to find the permit for my house and it was built in 1940 and it was in March. So I only had to go through like 30 or 40 clicks of slides. But sometimes when you don't know the year or you think you know the year, you have to start the year before and maybe go to the year after to try to find it. Especially like in the case of this one, the Board of Adjustment made, because of the change, there was a date up at the top and it was scratched through and a new date put because I think related to the Board of Adjustment. And then they wrote on it that the Board of Adjustment had approved the change. And then it looks like the date was written back in.
Well, I certainly think that under criteria M, the potential to add information, important information to our local history, is easily, if I may use the term, a slam dunk based on what we've heard here today and the information in the packet. And I would like to thank Pastor Danoon and Ms. Jones for bringing this to the commission's attention. It really is quite significant. And prior to our last meeting, I did some background research on Benny Gordon. And he is an extraordinary individual who gave so much to our community. And he was instrumental in the integration of the Webster Groves public swimming pool. And that was quite a long fight. And actually the pool was newly built. Mr. Gordon and some of his friends went to take a swim and they were told that they were not allowed to be admitted. There was a court case filed and they prevailed, but rather than integrate the pool was actually closed for a number of years, but ultimately integrated. And that was because of Mr. Gordon and his pointing out the injustice that Black residents pay taxes here. This was built with taxpayer money and this is just wrong. And the courts sided with Mr. Gordon. And it's because of him and people like him that we now recognize how just perfectly outrageous that was, that pool not being integrated. And well, it's quite an interesting history. I would encourage anybody who has the time to look at more of the information on Mr. Gordon. He faced a lot of injustice, and it's remarkable, some of what I was reading. And I thought it was extraordinary that he always remained positive and productive and sought a way forward no matter what. And we are actually meeting here today in the Gordon Room, which is named for Mr. Gordon. So I think that, you know, obviously this whole the Marvin Court Historic nomination is associated with a significant individual in our community. And also too, I mean, the house looks like it's in original condition, and it's in very nice condition, and it's an excellent example of the type of architecture that was popular in being constructed then. So I personally am very much in favor of the nomination of 15 Marvin Court.
So do we want to make a motion with the amendment to add bullet point D, this location is a site of a significant local, county, state, or national event?
I'll make a motion. to include the-
I'll second.
Is that our official motion for?
Do you want to make an
Official
official motion
let's do the
to now?
official motion. So we did the motion to add. That.
You want to make do a vote on adding D first?
Yes. Do we have to go around individually?
Not individually, but if you would just ask for a motion, so you had a motion and a second, ask for all of them to vote in favor or opposed, and then you can do the full motion.
Okay, so all those in favor of adding bullet point D,
Aye.
is there anyone opposed? Okay. Does
Now you
anybody
need to ask
have-
for a motion.
Okay, just, does anybody have any other questions or comments before making an official motion?
Mara, do you need us to read the criteria verbatim off of or can we just refer to it by
You can refer to it by the
the letter designations?
correct.
I'll make a motion to approve the historic nomination of 15 Marvin Court based on its significance in illustrating bullet item A, E, M, as well as D.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed?
So the next step for those that are here in attendance is this will go to city council for another public hearing. Pretty much the same as this one. I will make a presentation to the city council summarizing some of the information from this. And then everyone will be able to also speak in favor of the hearing. And then after that hearing, they would be able to close it, do a first and second reading, and then 2 weeks later, they would go to a final reading of the ordinance designating it as a local historic structure.
When will that next council meeting be?
I put it in the ad.
On Tuesdays if that.
No, I had to put it in the ad for a specific date, so hold on, I apologize. I had it on.
Is it the next one?
It's not the next one because of the way I had to do the ads, so
Oh, okay.
hold on, sorry, I wanna say. Ugh, I will make sure I have it, add in the packet.
So we meet on the 17th and then again on November 7th.
Can I grab the full packet for a second? I think the ad's in the packet and I can tell you what date it's on. Ooh, oh,
Ooh, something's happening.
oh, Oh, it's not happening.
you know.
Oh.
History and the.
That's what I guess.
Looks like that when your cat works on.
Yeah.
Okay, so here we go, sorry. City council meeting hearing is scheduled for Tuesday, November 7th at 7:30 PM. And it should be the only hearing that night. I don't have any other hearings that night. So it would be the first item on after any proclamations or anything else that they're doing that evening. So for those that want to attend in person, it'll be across the hall in the council chambers. For those who want to attend on Zoom, you have the opportunity to also watch on Zoom.
That's 3 minutes, right?
Yes, the applicant is allowed usually more time because it's being a presentation. And then for any questions, and then it's only those who want to speak that are just speaking in favor would be given 3 minutes to speak. We were a little more flexible. So that will be on the 7th.
The preacher was.
Restoring little sermon.
And for anyone who wants, all of the exhibits are in a PDF attached to the agenda from tonight's meeting on the city council, or I'm sorry, on our city website. And then this hearing will be available starting tomorrow on YouTube on the city's website if anyone wants to rewatch our fun. We laughed a lot.
And I just also footnote to history, one of the reasons why the lawsuit was brought was not just because they were accusing the city of not giving them sufficient notice, but by creating an industrial park around their real estate lost significant value. And the city said, no, it doesn't. You don't know that yet. I know.
Just like, wow.
Okay, do we have any visitor comments regarding anything that is not on tonight's meeting agenda?
Only house on their street.
So that's gonna move us along to our new business. We do have several demolition recommendations on tonight's agenda. First one being 12 Euclid Avenue.
Yeah, sorry, we might have someone who has,
Visitor comment?
yes, she just said visitor comments
Oh,
for
I'm
something
sorry.
not on the agenda.
Yes, actually, we're here regarding the Bethany Lutheran Church.
Oh, yes.
Just in order to bring that from, we plan on, actually, I believe the process is started and we're here to kind of introduce ourselves.
So go ahead and, so similar to last month's meeting where we had a visitor coming to talk about a potential nomination. I had let a group of people know that they could come to talk about another potential nomination. In this case, this potential nomination would be something that either you as a commission or the city council might have to suggest the recommendation to nominate. It's a little different. So you all know that with the Lustron homes, our process was we nominated as a commission, decided to pursue that and then put the letters out to all the property owners. When it's not a property owner asking us to nominate, only the commission as a group can move forward with that. So just a thought about that. So if you want to go ahead and.
Why don't you go ahead, since you're actually
Well,
historically tied to the.
right, it's a beautiful.
Do you want to go ahead and state your name and other things for the record? And
My
if you
name is Bob Springer, and I am kind of tied ancestrally to the Bethany Lutheran Church and resident of Walter Rose. And there's been some developments with the church and the Evangelical Lutheran Synod that they now have the building up for sale, and we are concerned that it is going to be snatched up by a developer and possibly demolished. And we just really, the historical significance of the building, I think it's kind of personal issue for me, but I think that it really deserves to be put on. some register. Something preserved and see that it's preserved for the future.
I was just alerted that the neighborhood in question that was demolished for this industrial in the twenties was all Danish. And
That was their
boys and shit, like that. So it's a weird little section of West Virginia. Definitely has history and architecturally, I believe that it's definitely a landmark. It's towers above everything else, it's people. And it also has historic significance, the artists have painted
Right.
the mural behind it all.
The Danes were a big part of the community. Yeah. And we're movers and shakers in the community, I think. So we really are hoping that we can get the building preserved and the parsonage.
Are we open to ask questions?
Yeah, so it's with the visitors as the chair can,
Okay. Would the intention be to keep it as a church, an operating church?
I think that is the hope, is that it remains
That's your best use.
best use.
Okay, yeah.
I also have a long standing history of this community. My grandfather was Martin Toft. He was Danish. My family's lived in this community for 5 generations now. And I've lived and worked here as have most of my cousins. Very involved in the community. My grandfather possibly was one of the builders of the church. He was also a building contractor in Webster Groves. Started building in Webster in the 1890s. So our roots go way back to this community, and I think a lot of people are not aware how many Danes actually settled in this community.
And they're still here.
And they're still here. My grandfather's brother had a dairy farm in Webster Gardens. So they were all over throughout the whole community. And I have been involved with the Danish Club of St. Louis, so I also represent them. I'm very concerned with meeting in that building, using it for events, all types of venues for so long. So we are very, very concerned that the building be preserved. And it was the intention of the former president of the Danish Club to see that turned into a historic site.
And I'm sorry, can you state your name?
My name is Linda Boone, and I'm one of the Tops, the Top family of Webster Groves.
So is the is it Presbyterian church? Is it the Presbyterian that are the Lutherans? Is it the Lutherans that would sell it? Who actually owns the church?
Well, the Evangelical Lutheran Synod in Kansas City,
Okay.
Central State Synod,
But actually,
claims ownership.
they claim ownership, but actually the church was, the monies from the church were from the Danish immigrants in this. And what happened was when the congregation fell off, there was a gentleman that came into that body and succeeded in convincing the other people that they had no other option but to go to the Senate and to relinquish the church. So that is now debatable. They took $100,000 of their assets, Senate did. And if they did not have legal votes, there was not enough people there for a quorum. There's a lot of things that are very questionable about the whole procedure.
And you mentioned a parsonage. Is that a separate structure from?
It is a separate
the
structure.
church?
It's one parcel. But the parsonage is separate. To the east.
All in one line, so it has not been some.
Was there still a congregation meeting there?
They're not allowed to. They would if they could. And we were very eager to join them, Bob and I, and other family members, so that we could have some standing in, future of the church. But they said at that point they would not allow us to do that.
Services were
So.
Can you help me with the location? Is that the blue church that's by the railroad tracks?
It is.
It is
Okay.
kind of like, yeah,
401, 401, Fairview, I think.
Fairview.
I think I know, I'm sure. I know.
Yes, right.
Just for the members to know, we do have a 2 to 3 page historic inventory sheet that was done a few decades ago. So we do have quite a bit of initial research on the church that's in our records. Do you know what
Find
year it was
our
built?
ancestors' names on that and
I apologize, I did not bring it up with me, but it has the research with a lot of information. It's about 3 pages long. Most of our inventory sheets are a page with a photo, and this one's like 2 full pages, I think, with photograph.
I remember when the story was in the Webster Kirkwood Times.
yes.
And that was about a year
About a
and a
year
half
ago.
ago. And I remember being quite concerned when I saw the photographs of the building and how beautiful it is. So I'm.
it is gorgeous.
Yeah.
You could have services today. It's just really-
It just needs some updating, you know, like any old building. It does not have a ramp, a handicap ramp. It does not have, you know, an elevator, but these are things that could, you know, could be done if their funds were restored, certainly.
Right.
Is the ownership being litigated? Is that what you're alluding to?
Well,
Maybe.
It's not clear
Great.
right now. It's kind of muddy.
very much.
And so ELCA says they have every right to seize it and sell it. And we believe that they need to prove that. They need to prove that they have that right to do that. Then we are still concerned about the possible demolition at some point in the meantime. And so this is happened pretty quickly.
They had promised us they would preserve the records, and we were there when they
That's
took
it.
them and threw them into the dumpster.
And then
Records that went back to the beginning of the church. So,
just disregard. It was
Total
just
disregard.
plundering.
they were like vultures in there.
Okay, let's mark church history. You know,
Records that probably have never been seen by historians.
It was, it just
Oh,
made
yeah.
us physically sick. Physically sick. He was the city. Oh, yeah.
Thank you for listening.
We really appreciate it.
So we're doing a public hearing next meeting, is that?
The commission has to decide.
So it's on the agenda, just bring it.
So again, the commission has to make a determination on moving forward because they would have to be the nominees. They would have to nominate it
Yeah.
as a commission,
Okay.
per the code.
Okay.
Yes.
And then, in order for us to discuss it, would that have to be something we could decide to put on next month's?
So technically, at the end of the demolition conversation, because those are formally on the agenda, you could still discuss it as new business. But I think formally you would have to put it onto an official agenda, to make. Because if it's not officially on the agenda, having a conversation and determining, but you can have an early conversation, it's not read for the public. But you could have an early conversation tonight as a new business item to put it on or ask for certain things you'd like to make a decision on whether to move it forward. If you do move it forward at the next meeting, we couldn't have a hearing probably until
And at that time, we would notify, who would we notify?
So typically, you notify whoever is on the record with St. Louis County
Okay.
in terms of that information. Probably to cover all bases, we would notify Kansas City's, primary offices. We would also put an ad in the paper. So we don't always put an ad in the paper. For example, if someone's nominating their own house, it's not required in the code to put an ad in the paper. To cover all our bases with the Lustron homes, we put an ad in the paper. We would probably also put an ad in for this one, which would just add an extra level of comfort that you've done your proper due notification. So I mean, we can go through these demolitions if you all want to stay and listen to the conversation about what we might need to move forward, but these are on, we've got to get through these demolitions on the agenda.
Why don't you do that? If we want to listen, we can listen on Zoom.
There you go.
That time.
Thanks very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
I was gonna ask if they were there.
I bet they did. Can't imagine I was.
I wouldn't let that.
Would be the first time I did it.
Okay, so new business or demolition recommendations, 12 Euclid Avenue, single family dwelling. This was on last month's agenda. We did hold the demolition request for additional research. I was able to do a little bit of research and did find an article about Walter L. Ambrose that listed his mother as living at this house. That is also a picture of him down below. Obviously, the structure he's standing in front of is not notated. But I thought that was kind of interesting as that is very important to our local history.
Did he live there too with her, or was this after?
I have not been able to find information as of that.
I looked up in the census to try to figure out, and I found he actually lived at, and it was like, the name was so, the address was so familiar because I think it's one of the Lestron homes. Like according to 1950, he lived in 125 Eldridge. So I kept trying to go back in the census using his name and some ancestry stuff, but I couldn't pinpoint in the 10 or 15 minutes I had to research today.
And one other thing I noticed, some of the newspaper articles that were in our packet from last month listed the Hubbards living, and it said 12 Euclid Street, which I don't know if that was a typo or if it was a different house altogether. I did try to look up his mother, Mrs. J.A. Hull, and I wasn't really able to find much that talked about her. I did notice that in that birth notification from last month's newspaper articles, the Hubbards, the wife's name started with a J, Hubbard, so I didn't know if there's a connection there. Personally, I think it could warrant a little bit more digging just because of finding this information.
I wasn't here last month and I did read through all the minutes and everything, but I don't recall anything about this house. Is it in bad condition or what was the,
So the house is listed in our North Webster walking tour as potentially being one of the oldest houses in North Webster. It isn't that it's not, it was a rental property. It hasn't, it's a not a very deep lot. So it's kind of a small size lot. And they requested it as a demolition along with a number of others.
But didn't we discuss last month that if they would demolish the structure, they would not be able to build on the existing lot?
They could build on the existing lot, but it would be quite small.
Okay.
Yes, so they could, it would be quite small and they'd still have to meet certain things because they can't have a front entry garage on that block. They can have just the required parking pad. It's very, it's small enough that it would be hard to do a side entry garage. There's no backyard for a detached structure. So it's like, there's just, it's an odd lot because it is, even though it seems like it's bigger, the land next to it's owned by the church. So the lot is not very big. But that shouldn't preclude if someone does request it, allowing them to demolish it, but you need to all look at all your factors on whether you feel that you need more time to review, if anyone else has more time.
who has requested to demolish it? Who owns it?
It's an under properties.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So the name of, let's see, Wilbert's mother was Juanita. I got her date of birth. We try to look into that, and I didn't look into it, but this is a death certificate for the.
Yeah, and I was trying to do Google searches on Walter Ambrose. Obviously, there's a lot of information out there about him and the school district in Webster and his time in World War II. But I wasn't able to kind of track his lineage as far as his parents go, and I haven't attempted to look for a birth certificate.
So is that current, is that garage there part of that property?
The garage was built after the fact. You can see in the aerial photographs, and I don't remember the year right now, but that was added more recently.
Yeah.
You can see it if you go through St. Louis County's aerial photos of when it was added to the side of the house.
As big as the house.
Is the intention to have a vacant lot? Is that the,
At this point, they do not have a plan that they have shared with us for what they want to do on this lot.
It's not contiguous to another demolition request, right?
It is not. You do have a limited time frame for when you can hold this over. After a certain point, a decision has to be made one way or the other. So you do have the ability to hold it at least one more. And then after that, there's a time frame that kicks in that you either are gonna nominate it and move it through that part of the process, or give approval for demolition.
For what?
Nominated for a local structure, a historic structure.
And that protects it from demolition.
It protects it from, now it's gotta go through a public hearing for the demolition request, which is a little different than these are not public hearings.
Has anyone approached you about advocating for this property or?
But again, it's not like it's some big common knowledge that it's being requested for a demo. For the demos, there's not a requirement for us to like put a sign in the yard or anything like that. We only have to do that if it is a historic structure already being requested to be demolished. But we're still at the point of we do have, according to county records, it was 1920, which would make it just over 100 years old. According to the walk, they think it's more like around 1900. But again, we don't have, our records for building permits to research don't go back before 1918. There are some tax records we could maybe attempt. It just comes down to who has the time to do some more research on this. And is there enough information for the next step for nominating it?
It seems to me that, based on the findings that Anne brought to us, that it would be worth having some more time to take a look. I think a little more detail. Because it's, you know, for so many we've tried and there's been like not really anything substantive, but I think this has potential.
Yeah, I wish I could have found easier information regarding his parents and kind of stemming from there, and I didn't really have that much time to do that. And I didn't even think I would find this, so.
To delay for another month for the nomination.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Is there anyone opposed?
Okay.
So J A Hall, J Hubbard.
So when we move forward on researching this, it just kind of makes sense to be kind of organizing. What are we looking for? Who's gonna look for what? Rather than we all just kind of hit Google and, you know, newspaper or whatever. So how do we do that outside of the meetings? Or do we have to organize that here?
So normally a few people recommend, I usually get us through all the demolition recommendations, and then if there's one that's being held over, all of you make a determination on who's gonna be able to do certain research. So last time when we were this was a couple times ago, but we had 2 or 3 people, one who said, I'm gonna go look for anything in building permits, or I'll go look in the tax records, or if someone has access to something, I just happened to have I was looking for something on Ancestry, so I got my little free 2 weeks. So because I already was in Ancestry over the weekend, I was able today to start putting things in, which helped me find the census, which I normally don't have access to, and that's where I was able to find he was an art teacher, and I was like, oh, he was a teacher, and it gave the address, and that's how I was able to find Eldridge. So if someone already has like an ancestry.com account that they're working with, someone might be able to find some other things. We do have our newspapers.com account, which we have a username and password for historic preservation. So we usually just sort of different members divvy up and say, hey, I have some time, I'll go research this or this. And then they provide the information back to me and I put it in your packet for the month. I mean, you can do it now if you want to, or we could go through the rest of the demolitions and then talk about it. Either works.
I mean, obviously I pulled what I found from newspapers.com. I don't mind continuing searching there. Also, I know St. Louis County death records is kind of a good place to get parent names, date of birth, things like that. So that's something that I can also kind of look into now that I have other names to investigate. And sometimes when you look at an obituary, even for that person, it'll say preceded in death by parents, and then it gives you some names to work
And
with.
I found his obituary and,
It didn't
you
have,
know,
of
because
course,
it had his accolades and his children and his grandchildren.
And I think I found something from a different census where he was living in a boarding house in the city. And there were a couple other things that I was able to briefly find. And most of them said he was born in 1919. Others said 1918. So it's either late 1918 or 1919, which means that if this house is from 1900 or 1920, you're kind of right in the middle of, they could have lived there, they couldn't. So that's gonna be a little.
Like my sister does ancestry.com and I asked her to look into this, and she was able to find relatives of, I think, one of the daughters who lives in Indianapolis, was like 4 of them. They all moved over. So is it something that we would consider to contact people who may have any information of? I mean, is this too far? I mean, how far down the rabbit hole is going? It's like,
I feel like with that being more along, if we decided we wanted to designate this.
then we find out if this we can.
Yeah.
Well, I volunteer at the Hawken House in the archives. And so,
Between the two of you.
yeah, and I talked to Steve Schoenbeck, who's the archives manager, and I told him about these 2 names and they didn't, both Hubbard and
Hall.
yes. He said, he's welcome to set up a time with me to kind of go through the archives, because he's got this whole Find Me on his computer and, so we could try that, but he wanted to set up a separate time to do it, so rather than have, so I can follow up with that.
That'd be great.
And so that refresh my memory, it was allegedly, according to the tax records, built in what, 1920?
Yeah, 1920
And our records in the Webster
Go back
Library.
to 1918.
Well, I could look at 1918, 1919, and 1920 to see if there's anything there
Yeah,
for this.
we could at least say we couldn't find a building permit for that, which could mean that it's older.
And with the tax records, those go by.
They go by name. So if you know when someone lived there, like you can start with, like if you knew 1942, someone lived there. You can start with that tax record, look it up by name, and then go to the next year back and look it up by name and kind of do it backwards that way.
It's kind of a pain though, because when you hit a dead end,
Yeah.
you have to go over to the county
Yeah.
and try to make hay for an hour in old micro.
Right. Which is painful.
Yes, and not always fruitful. But, sometimes you'll look out and you'll get an owner name and then you can go back to the tax records, but They only let you in there an hour at a time.
And our books that we have, I usually can get us back to the 1940s. I usually can't get any farther back than that. I can usually give people a few names. So if they want to do a deed search, they can start with that particular last name that they found.
So it's last name, that person.
Well, so this is a totally different thing. We've got these large books from St. Louis County where they used to record the name and the date of the purchases in pencil on a book. And I've got all the original books that county gave us. So when I'm trying to determine ownership prior to the code says prior to 1956, that helps me determine whether a lot can be split or it's a separate lot or it's a joined lot. All of that, I have these books that have back to the 1940s about. Anything before that, it's not in these books. So sometimes I can find stuff and give you a couple names going backwards. And I don't even think I even had gotten to that point yet because.
Well, in the article that I found with his mother's name, I
was in
believe
the
was from
40s.
1945, I think it was.
I thought it was still during the war. So it said he was currently somewhere in Germany. European Theater of Operations. And I think 45 is when I saw that he had been discharged from the army.
I think because I used the preservation's newspaper art account, it should show my searches in there. So
Oh, yeah.
I can go back, get the date from.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've approved that one. So then next property is 3421 South Brentwood Boulevard, Unit A. It is listed as a single family dwelling. I believe last month, Unit B was on our agenda. Yes. It was approved for demolition. And it was built in 1966. The city has no records pertaining to historic property inventory sheets, and it has not been previously identified as an at-risk property that should be looked at for possible degradation. And staff recommends approval of the request to demolish the existing single-family dwelling.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed? Okay, next up is 3425 South Brentwood Boulevard, Unit A, again, a single family dwelling, it was also built in 1966, no records pertaining to historic property inventory sheets. It has not been previously identified as an at-risk property that should be looked at for possible designation. And staff recommends approval of the request to demolish the existing single family dwelling structure.
Might want to read the second one the next one at the same time because it's.
And yes, the next property is 3425 South Brentwood Boulevard, Unit B. So it's listed as a single family dwelling, obviously Unit A, Unit B is one structure.
Do we have any indication of what they intend to do with these properties, either same as the other?
Yeah, at this time, we have no, they've not given us any plan of action.
And that wouldn't necessarily play into our. With the vote on the structure
It
itself.
says it on the bullet list. It does in the bullet list on that staff report what they're planning on doing.
Oh. Yes.
Is these two parcels, why are they two separate buildings?
It's a duplex.
It's a duplex, so we officially. In our records, they're two separate units, so we always say. You need to, that we had to do an individual occupancy inspection of each of them, and so we had them apply separately.
I'm just curious.
Yeah, We don't really have very many duplexes in all of Webster Groves. Obviously, if you're gonna approve one, you're probably gonna approve the other, but we wanted to officially on the record have that we did all of our due diligence.
So that purchase price is for about.
For the whole thing. Yeah, for the whole thing.
So do we need to do the motion separately or?
Do the motion separately, but I wanted to make sure, last time there had been the question, because they weren't able to get into the one unit, and so that's why they came separately, one at one meeting, one at the other meeting, which I know caused some confusion. So I just wanted to make sure you had noted that they were back to back, but you would do separate motions and separate votes on each of them.
I move we approve 3425 South Brentwood Boulevard, Unit A for demolition.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed?
I'll make a motion to approve 3425 South Brentwood Boulevard, Unit B for demolition.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed? Okay, moving on to 420 North Elm Avenue. The existing single-family dwelling was built in 1940. The city has found no records pertaining to a historic property inventory sheet for the property. It has not been previously identified as an at-risk property that should be looked at for possible designation. And staff recommends approval of the request to demolish the existing single-family dwelling structure.
And also last one. Like a duplex.
So this one's a single, and then last month there was 416. So yeah, very close, very similar. For a lot of these, they look very much the same. They were built around the same time, sort of next to each other.
Continues on the same block, right?
Correct.
Make a motion to approve the demolition.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, next property is 237 East Jackson Avenue. It is a single-family dwelling that was built in 1927. City has found no records pertaining to historic property inventory sheets. The property has not been previously identified as an at-risk property that should be looked at for possible designation. And it looks like the applicant does have plans to build a single-family home on the lot. Staff recommends approval of the request to demolish the existing single-family dwelling structure.
I could not find this house. I have no idea.
It
where it
is so back in, so it's down by the Schnooks.
Okay, yeah.
And it's so back in the lot. It's very deep in the lot.
Okay, so the lot takes up the whole, does it have a continuous lot all through the street? It's like a driveway that goes back in
It
there?
has a continuous
On
lot
the
on the
lot.
street.
So it's really narrow then.
It is, well, it's actually kind of wide, but it's got a little bit of an odd shape and the house is pretty far back compared to other houses on the block. And as you can tell from the photos, it's pretty well hidden from the street.
It looks like it's pretty distressed
Yes.
conditions.
To approve. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, last property is 205 Slocum Avenue. It is a single family dwelling that was built in 1940. City has found no records pertaining to a historic property inventory sheets. It has not been previously identified as an at-risk property that should be looked at for possible designation. The applicant does have plans to build a single family home on the lot, and staff recommends approval of the request to demolish the existing single family dwelling structure.
I have a question. When I vote yay or nay, is it strictly on the historical significance of the house?
Yes.
I just want to say that I have a little soft spot in my heart for this house because the lot is beautiful with mature trees, and I just think I actually sent that house to my son when it first went on the market, thinking it would be a good place for him to start living in Webster. And I can't help but think that there's probably gonna be $1 million house built on that lot and nobody in my son's caliber will ever be able to buy it. So anyway, I just wanted to give my 2 cents on that.
I mean, looking at the photos, it does look like it was well cared for.
Those floors look
Brand new, really refinished.
I think it just.
A year plus ago,
Was it rented or?
I think it was a rental
Yeah, I
property.
think it was a rental.
for a while.
And like the description is like beautiful, no? Or-
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it's beautiful. It's a cute little house. They just want to go. I agree with everything.
Conservation districts,
Yes.
would that protect something like that?
Potentially, I mean, depending upon the surrounding property owners and the character of what's there and what people want to do and what to preserve. I mean, we'd have to, as we would go forward, we need to kind of structure what criteria would be applicable, but it would have the potential for even people in the neighborhood to say, hey, you know, we want to keep our houses this size. And if anybody does add on to them, you know, these are the criteria we want followed. So, yeah, it does. And I also, you know, as I've said previously, I just from people I've talked to, so many people feel like, well, you know, planning and zoning is planning and zoning. If they allow it, we have no choice but to accept these huge homes built in our neighborhoods of smaller houses. And then, you know, you find yourself surrounded and not wanting to live there anymore. But if people have kind of a grassroots way of saying, hey, this is what we want, this is what we don't want, this is who we want to be, then areas, neighborhoods are empowered to do something for themselves, to protect themselves, and they don't have to just, you know, surrender to what the planning and zoning district regs are, because the conservation district could be an overlay to them. So. As we've all noted and said, and this is another one of those cases, you just hate to see really nice, well cared for, livable, affordable housing demolished. But, you know, unfortunately, that's have to go down another path in order to do that, because with the criteria that we have to judge here this evening, there's really not much we can do about it.
I don't think we have enough information. I don't think we have enough evidence that it's a historic structure.
I don't think it is. It's just a cute one.
Yeah.
And the idea of a historic district for that area, bigger than my first house. Is that
It's
a
not.
little too late?
Unfortunately, yeah, that area is.
Targeted by developers.
We've lost a few of our oldest houses in that area before we changed the codes. Few of our oldest ones weren't even 100 years old and were able to be demolished before this change, so that houses 50 years or older had to come before historic preservation. And then there was one that there just wasn't anything, we didn't have enough information other than it was a really old house on one of the oldest ones that was on around the corner that went a while ago too. The yellow one. Can't remember what color it was. That was Parsons.
With white columns in front of it. That one.
I'm gonna forget. It's been enough years ago.
I don't know.
Oh, that's-
Yeah, it had the tall white columns and there was an antebellum light fixture that they threw in the trash.
I believe that one was on the,
It was on the western side of the block, because now
Yeah.
there's,
wasn't it on the walk? This is,
Yes, it was on the wall.
It was a very large lot. They wanted to put more than one house
It was
on
like
it.
3 acres, wasn't it?
Yeah, very large.
there was a barn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Make a motion.
She's not gonna do it.
I'll regrettably make the motion to approve the demolition of 205 Slocum Avenue.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed?
Present.
Yeah. Although there's, I mean, they've already, like you said, there's that whole area that's really with these huge houses. They just put those big lots and just put these huge things.
Just want to make sure I have the vote on that one.
Such enthusiasm.
There were some under the breath responses.
So what was the, because, so abstaining is more abstaining because you have a conflict of interest. So I want to make sure, so you're either voting for or against.
I
voted
don't wanna.
We all voted A, but I think we were joking.
No, that's okay. I
Just joking.
I just want to make sure I have it on the record, because I have to have it on the record. So what was the final, was it,
It's unanimous.
Unanimous.
okay,
You saw, we would agree with it.
If we had to vote on the criteria we have. then it's-
you do have the opportunity now to have a brief discussion about adding a new item on next month for Bethany, if you would like to discuss it.
So. I guess I did like clarify that with them. Are they hoping that it gets a local designation?
Yes.
They wanna save it. So I think whatever path gets them there.
The quickest.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you think they have to solve their ownership issues? Yeah, it seems like that.
So from the standpoint of what our historic ordinance says, the commission or the city council both have the ability, if you're not an owner of a property within Webster Grove, to nominate any property or group of properties as historic. So you, as the Historic Preservation Commission, can designate or nominate someone or some structure without the property owner applying. But a group of unrelated people who have no ownership in it and aren't on historic preservation and aren't on the city council don't have the ability to request it. So they're just simply making you aware of a structure that they're concerned about, which allows you the opportunity to, if you would like to take that up as something, you have the ability to do that.
And then whoever owns it is really not, if it passes, it's really not our concern who.
They have the ability to, so again, we will make them aware of hearings and other things. They can come to those hearings or
Okay.
zoom in on those hearings and make their concerns known if they do not want it to be designated.
Okay.
So with Lustrum, this was, several here who gathered that information. And here, it's gonna take several people here to gather that information to pull this forward, it looks like to me.
I have a
Quite a bit.
I have a
already.
pretty large 3-page historic inventory sheet, which is what you usually use to start a nomination. So for the next meeting, if you want it on the agenda as a discussion point to determine if you want to start the process, I can provide you with that historic sheet. I can also reach out to the various people who attended and see if they would like to share any other information that they have or have found, and we can put that into your packet. We could put it on as new business, similar to how we put on 15 Marvin Court as new business. In that case, we knew that the owner was going to be asking you to nominate it, so totally different piece.
Yeah.
But we've done both. So we've done Lustrons where it was the commission who gathered data and determined that we wanted to nominate it. In the past, we've had other individual homes where the applicants come forward. And then we've also had small, like mini districts where the commission did the research, nominated it. It was, letters were sent to all the property owners, and in those cases, if they wanted to come speak, they could. With the Lustrons, because they were all individual, the council did end up removing some of them that the applicants did not want to be designated. With the small historic district, there was some banter back and forth, a little bit of opposition, but the whole little mini district, this is on Marshall in the block just to the west of Maypop, that one moved forward and was designated.
Yeah, how unique is this situation? You know, we don't have the owner is absent, could possibly say no thanks and fight us on this. And we've done all this work, and I assume, can we even declare it a historic district, a historic site if the owner says no thanks?
Yep, you definitely
You
can.
can't, okay.
Well, according to the county assessor, the owner is Thania Danish Evangelical Lutheran Church.
Yes, and then that's where it comes down to, like, any of these churches are under a bigger overarching. And so it's the Kansas City overarching Lutheran organization that is the one who has deemed that when, and I know enough to be dangerous on this, I don't know enough of everything, but they deemed that enough members were no longer meeting on a regular basis. Starting in about 2020, there was a woman living in the church. And there was a lot of different rumors going around, and then there was a conversation related to some members talking about what their next steps might be, and it did go up to the Kansas City, whatever, and then all the steps happened to the point where it is now on the MLS for sale. So I have run the information for various people. It is a single lot, and it's been a single lot for a very long time. But it does have both a church and the parsonage. The parsonage has been rented out to people in the past as a separate, structure house. And then the overall land, if someone were to demolish it all, and some engineer came in and really by the minutia figured out how to make it work, you could maybe eke out 3 lots. But that would be someone really trying to figure it out to meet you, because you've got to meet both a width of lot at the building line, an average width of lot, and a minimum lot size. And the overall square footage just ekes out 3 lots.
It's a big parking area, as parking areas go.
And to, whether it's a parking area or not, would, like, if someone just
Yeah.
took the whole piece of land, someone could maybe eke out on one side and then would have to, with minutia, figure out.
It's
how
not
to
a
meet.
square lot either, it's a,
It's not.
parallelogram.
On the railroad.
Yeah, it's a corner and it's parallelogram, which is why, like, I can't definitively say, no, you can't get 3 lots. It's gonna be tough and someone would have to engineer it. You could get 2 lots. And I don't know, someone has asked me before, like, if you tore down the church and just kept the parsonage building, I just don't know without a survey whether you can, meet the minimum lot width and get that line over so that that building meets the side yard setback. And then what would be the buildable area left, because it is a corner property. And so you've got a few established setbacks that would be determined by the parsonage and by the house on the lot behind, which would start to tighten up what they could build on that quote second lot. But if someone came in and wanted to split all 3, they have the ability to ask the council to change or vary what those setbacks might be, because they'd be creating a whole new mini subdivision of 3 lots, because it's not just a standard lot split.
It's interesting that it's for sale and you found it's the church owner, the
Right,
county records.
right.
They obviously didn't put it on the market.
No, I don't know how that.
It has it for sale
works.
sign.
Well, yeah, it seems to me
It has it for sale sign.
a few years ago, there was, I believe it was Saint Stanislaus in the city
I was thinking the same. thing.
versus, the archdiocese, and they made the case that the Polish members of this congregation bought this, and, there was quite a long drawn out process of
Sounds like they're
litigation.
making the same argument.
And yeah, and it's like, this belongs to the congregation and the archdiocese does not have the authority to just seize this property from the congregation. And it sounds very similar. I personally, when I read about it and I saw the pictures of it and read about the architectural significance, as I stated before, I was quite concerned and I thought, oh my gosh, I hope that we get a chance to weigh in on this.
They have a valid argument. Obviously, it is a historic structure. And is it at risk, bringing it to our attention? Obviously, if somebody would buy it and want to demolish it, it would come
Still gonna
across
come to
us
you.
anyway. And what would we want to do at that point?
Well, yeah, I mean, I personally think it's worthwhile to be proactive about it. We could at least look into it that, if we put it on the agenda for the next meeting, we can just take a look at it. That's not a commitment to go forward, but I certainly think it's worthy of a look. I mean, that's my opinion.
I agree with
Yeah,
that. Also, I was too.
I mean, this could be one of those ones that riles up the neighborhood too, a beloved church building. Torn down.
But again, like Mara said, if it's gonna be put to local historic designation, we as a commission would be the ones to do that, not the visitors who were here
Right. Yeah,
tonight.
so that's what I'm proposing is that we as a commission take a look at the potential in pursuing this.
Yeah.
And put it on the agenda for the next meeting.
I can put on the agenda for new business. I can provide you with what backup information I have. We can reach out to those that attended today to see if they have additional information to share with all of you. And then just going back to a couple things. One, county's records are notoriously very, very behind when it comes to ownership. So from that standpoint, I would assume that it would stay looking like that, no matter what is happening with churches. And then going back just as a quick thing, so if it came to you, like, let's just say you started the process and it came to you before you finished a nomination, it will still come before you, just like any of these other demos, and you still have the ability to hold it for continued review, which gives you the opportunity to finish a nomination. It also could come to you and you haven't done the nomination, but you have information already gathered, and then you can start the process for nomination. So there's a lot of different tacks that you can take if it is something you do want to pursue, or if you're not ready to pursue it at this time, you have the option to pursue it later as a commission. Just wanted to give you all of those various scenarios. At one point or other, it will still have to come before you for a demolition. If it's already been nominated, it will come as a hearing, which will have a sign in the yard and other things related to the demolition request. I'll add it to the agenda if that's
Yes.
the agreement.
Go for it.
Yeah, I'd like to
And
at
then we
least
get
learn
to-
more about the structure. And I guess if we, saying hypothetically, if we would move forward with a local historic designation, since there is a parsonage, which is a separate structure, but it's all on one plot of land, would we have, like, would we be able to nominate both as one unit, or do we?
Yes, so just so you know, so typically when things, it's both usually the land and the structure or structures, which can include accessory structures. It can include secondary structures. So it's like creating a little mini historic district with the two structures on it.
Kind of like when we do a farmstead or historic designation.
But do you have to do it that way, or could they be nominated separately, like just a church?
You
Just a
could-
parsley, we don't
you-
know what we're gonna find. so
Yeah,
it
you
be
could
like-
do it separately. Yeah, you could.
Could be either way. I'm
Yeah.
just curious.
I think to just go ahead and put the whole parcel with both buildings on it for a preliminary look would be the thing to do. So there's the possibility of keeping it intact.
I'll put it on your next agenda and I will give you all the information and I will try to get the packet out as early as possible, in case anyone wants to do their own research ahead of time. In fact, I could probably go ahead and send out at least the inventory sheets that I have, just so that you can get an early look before I put the packet together.
That sounds good.
I'll send out inventory sheets.
So that brings us to our old business, which is our discussion about our 2023 project, which 2023 is rapidly coming to an end.
2023-2024.
Right, do I need to amend that, for the conservation districts?
You guys can decide what you want to do. It has been a long,
It has, and we kind of started talking about it and then wanted to do more research. And then we had several new members join.
I don't see any reason why we can't just move it forward to subsequent agendas when we don't have, more pressing matters with individual structures. I mean, I'm fine with that, and if that's something that's available to us to do.
it used to be that apparently there used to be, the agendas used to have like 18 things on that the commission kept thinking might be a potential project, and I kind of did away with that because it was like there were too many. But I think you all had narrowed this one down. So it moving forward is not a big deal at all, especially if you end up taking on a couple other potential nominations.
Yeah.
So it's perfectly fine to keep it moving forward from agenda to agenda, because technically it's not like you've had a hearing and you've opened up a hearing or anything like that. I'll keep it on for the next few months, and then I don't know how many more demos we're gonna have or anything like that. We'll just see how next month goes.
I guess kind of just to recap, because we had a lot to discuss and process tonight. We did vote to hold the demolition recommendation for 12 Euclid Avenue. So obviously between now and the next meeting, if anybody wants to do any additional research based on what we have found so far. I feel really bad because I got you those articles like at 2:30 this afternoon, so it didn't give you much time to put them in the packets, but I guess anything that you can find send tomorrow.
I'm gonna look at the write-up on the wall.
Yeah.
It'll be in there, the way out on that there.
Okay, and next meeting is November 14th.
And then I know we kept postponing and postponing and postponing. Do people want to introduce, because we've got new members? And we kept postponing because we had, you wanna?
Yes, and I've been on Zoom, so I feel like it's nice to be in person. So I'm Ann Hallbox, chair. I've been a part of the HBC since December 2018, I think. I live in a century home. It turned 100 when my husband and I owned it. We threw it a 100th birthday party, did all the research, got the plaque. And I'm just fascinated, and I live and work in Webster and I love the area. So obviously this is a passion of mine.
I'm Brian Bergfeld, just joined my second meeting today. I've lived in Webster for 20 years, always lived in old houses. Just appreciate the architecture and just the stuff you can't replace anymore about some of these old houses. And I joined because of the Western Housing Project. I went to a council meeting while the firefighter stuff was really hot. And that was much more interesting than what was going on with me, than the firefighter stuff. So I decided to join that.
I'm Hillary Perkins. I don't live in a 100-year-old house, but I live in one that's getting there, built in 1927. But I'm here because I just love the idea, of course, historic preservation, and I like our community. Want to do what I can to make sure that the historical character of the city is continued.
I'm Jean Spur. I do live in a century home, 1890. Today. And I'm really busy with the Webster Historical Society. I'm just finished all our grant work up. we haven't seen, come on over. We're- So I've lived here since 1972. Graduated from college, and came here and lived in one of the few duplexes in Webster. Just still there.
I'm Sue Indelicato. I just re-upped. I just got reappointed. So I was filling another role. I've lived in Webster since 1988. I live in a 100-year-old house. I just, like everybody else, I love the architecture. My favorite thing is to walk around Webster. That's the highlight of my day most days. And just look at the beautiful buildings. So I just want to try to preserve some of that history.
Doug Stanley. This is my second stint on this commission. I was on for a while, dropped off, and then decided that I was passionate about it. So I came back on, and I was graciously allowed to come back on. Thank you, guys. Live in a century home, and we went through the process as a community to get the historic district status. And so I know how much work it is, or my wife was on the committee that did it actually. So I saw how much work she did on it. So it's just interesting. Glad you guys joined me. Thank you.
I'm Carol Dankey. I'm an historic architect. I serve on the Architectural Review Board as well. I've worked on a lot of historic projects professionally, a lot of state and federal tax credits projects, and then also some public sector projects as well. And I feel very strongly about historic preservation from the aspect of not only preserving the character of our community, which obviously we all love and enjoy, and it's beautiful, but I also feel very strongly about keeping our social and architectural history out of landfills. And I think that the work we do here is instrumental in that. And I'm so glad you enjoyed the Lustrons and came to join us. And my house turns 100 this year.
I can help you guys with birthday parties for that.
These are probably unique decorations.
We had, everybody was able to dress up from any decade from 1915 up. So we had 80s, 50s. My husband and I tried to dress up as accurately to 1915 as we could.
Oh, that sounds
We had a
fun.
band. It's a great time.
I hope you took a lot- I hope you took a lot of
Our house is
pictures.
very happy.
And I'm Emily Shepherd. I'm on council, so I'm the council liaison to this commission and to the Green Space Advisory Commission. And I do live in an old house, and I love Webster too. It's great to be the liaison.
So you're missing Angela Thompson, who is an architect, who had also been on Architecture Review Board, and now she's just on HPC, and she was not able to make it today. Her firm is in Hawaii, but she lives here in Webster. And then the other person who is not here tonight is Michael Rose, and it does look like Michael is probably going to be stepping back or stepping down. So if anyone knows of any other, I know we just filled with 3 people, which is awesome. So we're not as in need, but I think Michael's getting pretty busy and was saying that he was probably going to need to step down. So I don't have an official from him yet, so we'll wait on that. And then everybody knows who I am. I'm Mara Perry.
Can
And
I tell a real quick story about my house?
yes, yes.
So it's been a couple of years. We have dogs and we have a big picture. Oh, you know, picture window on the front of our house, and the dogs were going crazy at one point on this Saturday afternoon. And we look out the window and there's a woman in a sparkly cocktail dress and a man in a lovely coat and tie. And they were taking pictures of our house. So we had to find out what this was about. Turns out she was the granddaughter of the guy who built our house. So between what she knew and what we knew, we were able to establish every single owner of our house from the day it was built. And we let her invited in our house, of course, and our downstairs bathroom is pretty much unrestored. It's got this great big stainless steel tub in it. She said, I remember taking baths in that tub. That's all I wanted to
I
tell you.
really thought that was gonna be a ghost story.
My daughter's house is 1952, I guess, but it's only had 2 owners. They bought the house from the original owner. So that was kind of a neat thing, I think, that they stuck it, but both my daughter and her husband are architects, so. And a lot of architects on the street.
So my house, the original owners built it in 1915. The wife lived to be 99. So she had the house from 1915 till 1978. When my husband and I moved in 2010, we met the neighbor that lived catty corner across from us. Her husband and her built their house in 1954. She said her kids used to sled down Miss Millie's house, and Miss Millie was the original owner of our
Yeah.
house. So we like met somebody who knew the original owner of our 1915 house.
And we used to have neighbors, and our house during the Depression was Mrs. Sweet's boarding house. So Mr. Heath, who lived next door to us at that time, he's in a lot of these stories, but he knew everybody, so. He was like the second owner, I think, but.
I forgot to say the reason the lady was in the sparkly dress is because she was in town from Syracuse, New York, for a wedding of a family member. And she thought while they were in town, I left out that detail.
Just to see the house.
Right. Between the wedding and the reception, so.
Yes, have a big council update, just to say that next time before we meet, the plaza is being redone.
I sent an
Oh,
email
I
out to all the council
Oh, you did, I
members.
didn't, yeah,
That
okay,
was a nice.
so.
I sent it just to the members. I didn't send it to the liaisons because I sent it to all 4 of my commissions at the same time because it was just
You're
easier.
fine, I got it from Yvonne.
Yeah.
Otherwise, so that'll be nice.
All right, so next meeting, November 14th. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Great, thank you, everyone, and welcome.